In this video, we'll show how you can create a web application that uses the security framework that keeps track of the active users in the application. So we'll start out by going to the new project builder there. I'll say active users, and I'll enable the security framework. I'll go click OK. And then I'll say I want to create system tables. And I'm going to need to create a system table called active users to keep track of the active users in this application. So I'll go ahead there and say active users, and I'll call it underbar active users. And we'll see now that basically if we go look in the project properties, we'll see now that a table for active users has been defined. So there's active users, and there's our active user table called underbar active users. And we're going to keep the data for the last 3 days. So this means that we're going to be able to do queries like who was active within the last 3 days. But if we want to do a query like who was active in the last 10 days, we would need to change this value over here. So let's go ahead now and test this application. So I'll go here and say live test login component, and I'll do it on the classic server. I'll clean out the data before we publish. And let's log in as an admin. So this is user1@alpha.com. user1alpha. And we can see now that within the security framework, there's a new property here called active user. So I'll click on that. And that basically allows me to do a query to retrieve data about the active users. Let me just make that a little bit smaller so we can see it better. So we can see now that we can do a query that says, show me all the active users in the most recent 5 hours. So if I go here and say refresh data, I can see that the only active user was user number 1, and he has logged in twice. If we switch to the detail view, we can see that this active user, user number 1 has logged in, and then he's done 2 refresh callbacks. So if we now go and log out and then log in as user number 2, for example, user 2@alpha.com, and then user 2alpha, we'll see that user 2 does not have permission. User 2alpha. User 2 does not have permission to see the active user list. So let's log out and go back to user number 1. And now when we click on the active users and we refresh this, we see that user 1 has logged in, has now 5 items in his activity count, and user 2 has 1 record in their activity count. So if we go and look at the detail view there, we'll see that user 2 did a login, and he also did a log out over there, but we don't count logouts as activity. And there's all user 1's data. So we can retrieve activity either by the most recent specified number of hours, minutes, or days, or we can go and specify a range and specify a start date and an end date and retrieve activity for that particular date, as long as we are retaining the data that goes that far back. And you can set the number of days of data to be retained to 0, which means that you would never purge any data from the activity, from the user log. Thanks very much for watching.